I think we can start. All the participants, whoever is comfortable, please do open your cameras. We would be happy to see your faces. And welcome everyone to this talk. No, every year International Peace Day is observed on 21st of September. And it was in 1981 when the United Nations General Assembly had declared this day that we are going to be talking about strengthening the ideals of peace. And one of the most important thing was that this particular day would be talking about putting down weapons, and there would be ceasefire for 24 hours. But of course, all of us know that it requires much more much more than just putting down weapons and those 24 hours of ceasefire. And just to briefly talk about that, the world that we are living in. And it's a world of violence. Every day we witness something or the other, and the urge to dominate over the others is something which is very normal. And qualities like tenderness and compassion are considered to be effeminate. And the gains of modernity that we have, they are actually inseparable from the aggression of techno-developmentalism and militaristic nationalism. So we are used to war, we are used to violence, and we see colonial exploitation in new forms, and a consumer culture which is based on unlimited greed and desire. So yes, definitely there is more to building a culture of peace. So without taking much more time, I'm going to invite our speaker for today, Urmi Chanda, and on behalf of Interest Group on Dialogue, Fraternity, and Justice from Azim Premji University, we'll have Urmi Chanda to begin this session of probably series of talks that we might hold in future. So Urmi Chanda is a culturist who writes and researches Indian history and culture with a particular focus on religion and mythology. She has been a journalist for over 13 years and writes independently for various publications, including The Wire, Quint, Scroll, many more. And in addition, she has been a researcher for non-fiction TV shows. She has given talks on various platforms, including TEDx. And she has been a knowledge consultant for many other cultural projects that involve curation and translation and content creation. She has also experience in museum and non-profit sectors, placing her at the intersection of journalism, academics, as well as activism. She is currently pursuing her professional doctorate in Interfaith Studies as a Harmony Scholar from the University of Wales, Trinity, St. David. She's simultaneously the senior program coordinator of the Indian program at Seeds of Peace. It's an international peace-building organization. And from her work, what we've seen is that she's committed to peace building, and she's especially passionate about interfaith harmony, and she believes in the power of art and dialogue. And all of us know that, yes, art and dialogue can have a huge social impact. And Urmi has been there at the forefront of this. So I request Urmi to kindly take over.
Thank you, Sana. Thank you for having me, and thanks to everyone who's joined today. It really is a special occasion, and to be able to take the time out, because we all know what Zoom fatigue is all about. So it really makes me glad when people actually turn up for events like this. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and before getting into the talk, though, I want to take about 5 minutes for a small interactive activity. What I want to do is ask all of you, since we're talking about the culture of peace. Now, peace and culture are two very broad and abstract concepts. We all understand it and interpret it differently. So I'm curious to know what all of you think what peace is. So I'm going to paste this link here. Nupur, can you just paste the link for me? The last one that I shared in the chat box. If you click on the link, yes. So if you So I want everyone to click on this link that Nupur has shared. And when you click on it, I'll share the page that will pop up. You should see a blank screen like this. On one side, the word peace is there, and the other side, culture. I'm going to draw a quick line through the middle of it, so there's some division. And what I want all of you to do is, can you see what I'm demonstrating here? Sana, can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I want you all to use this fourth tool from the top, which is a sticky note. I want you all each to click on a sticky note, which will turn up like this. Write a small word or phrase that you associate, most with peace, or what you think peace is. I don't want long definitions, and it doesn't have to be your names. You want to put it, you're welcome to put your names. You don't want to put it, don't put your names. So, for example, for me, it would be, say, if I would equate it with, say, friendship. This becomes my entry. This is my entry. I save it, and it turns up as a sticky note here, right? So I can make it big, small. Since there are more than 25 of us, maybe we'll keep our sticky notes a little small, and our answers also, you can turn it around if you want. So I want you all to leave answers on this side, on the left side of your screen, under the peace category when you're defining peace. Similarly, when you do so for culture, do it on the right side of your screen, and you can maybe use a sticky note of a different color. For culture, maybe we can go with the color pink. What is culture for me? For me, it is, say, art, in a big way, what I think. So I will push art in on this side of the screen. So let's take about 5 minutes so that everyone can share answers. We're all looking at the screen together. It'll give me a sense of what we think it is, and then we'll go forward from there. Anyone has trouble with the tool, please tell me. I'll try to explain again. Justice requires transformation from within. Love and harmony. Interesting responses to what people think peace is.
Hi, sorry to interrupt. Mine is the sticky note right in the middle, and I can't move it on my phone. I need to move it towards the peace color.
I'll move it for you.
Thanks.
Yeah, and we're doing pink for culture and yellow for peace, or at least keep the side of the board. And please, nobody use this pen because it will create lines that we don't want. That's okay. I got that. I delete it. You all can just focus on the sticky notes. Culture defines who we are. Yes, very interesting. Love towards each other. Calmness and harmony. Dialogue, non-violence, graceful dissent, identity. Identity? Do you mean to place it on the culture section? Yes. Yeah. Care. Peace is okay. Peace is care, peace is tolerance. I think way of life might be an culture thing, right? History. Interesting. Culture is a type of capital to get access to certain resources. Architecture, beliefs. Yes, beliefs as culture is great. Is that it? I think there are more people in this group. Can I have a few more responses, please? If you're on your phone, I know it would be difficult, but if you can, it would be great to see your responses. Architecture, and please don't use the pen, whoever's using it, because it's, thank you. Traditions, I think that would be in the culture section. Trends, ways of life. Okay, I encourage all of you to continue to reflect on this, and everyone's also watching, I hope, the screen. So these are an interesting set of responses, and all of them are correct, in my opinion. because there is no one definition of peace, right? Because, we all perceive peace differently, where we are placed in life or what kind of violence we are experiencing, a remedy to that becomes our idea of peace. So each of us who, live in a certain context, in this time, in this place, each of us look at peace differently, and we can see, the variety of responses that are already there on this board. This gives us a nice idea. Culture, someone has mentioned change to meet the situation. Okay. I wonder if that fits in the peace category. Anyhow, this is what I wanted to demonstrate at the beginning of the talk, that it is a very diverse concept. And today, on the International Day of Peace, it is good to be reflecting and thinking about it and taking cognizance of what others think peace is, because we may act and believe and do as per our perspective of peace, but here's the first step to creating a peaceful situation where there is conflict, to recognize what it means to others. So, we may care, but see here, for instance, someone says care. If caregiving is your idea of peace, but for someone else it's justice, they'd say, Bhaiya, nahi chahiye, we don't want your care, you give us justice, I don't want your charity. So taking cognizance of what it means, what peace means to the other, especially to the other. For us, yes. So this is a starting point I wanted us to have. I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. You'll have the link. You'll want to reflect on it. You are welcome to do so. I will go back to sharing my presentation again. Thank you. Thank you for your inputs. Thank you for taking a moment to reflect and to engage with all the participants and with me. And yeah, we can move forward from here. So while we saw that peace can be many things to many of us, I thought we'll just touch upon a formal definition, because as you see, it is defined as a situation or period of time in which there's no war or violence in a country or an area, a state of harmony between people or groups, absence of mental anxiety, or a calm state. Just to bring to your notice that there are various aspects again, so one is a temporal definition. The first is a temporal definition of peace. The second is a social definition of peace. And the third is a personal definition of peace. So again, peace cannot be achieved until we touch upon all these aspects. I'll come into more models of peace building, which will bring to light many more ways and aspects of peace building, but I wanted you all to take notice of this, right? And here's a favorite Calvin and Hobbes cartoon of mine, which is very true, and which is also a clue to how I will be going forward. I will be talking about role models today, so that's why I put it there. So when we say peace, again, here's another interesting concept presented by Johann Galtung, sociologist who is also the father of modern conflict resolution and peace studies. He has defined peace in two ways. One is positive peace and one is negative peace. Now, for most of us, the idea of peace, or at least, the larger society, the idea is that of negative peace. So when there is no violence, we say there is peace. A great example is the state of affairs in India today. So we do not have overt conflicts, not in the way, or that civil conflicts are happening in many other countries. There are no guns. There is no army patrolling on the streets of our most cities, barring one or two exceptions. So we think if there is no war, there is peace. But there are many, many kinds of violence that is being inflicted on several communities in our nation. We have conflict that is based on religion, most evident. We have conflict that is based on caste, on socioeconomic categories, on gender. So is there really peace? So we definitely, even negative peace, we do not have entirely. And then we come to the aspect of positive peace, which is a very constructive way of looking at what peace is. These are the conditions that people need to actually lead or experience a peaceful life. which is defined by the attitudes, institutions, and structures that create and sustain peaceful societies. It's a very expansive definition, but yes, again, peace, like I said, is a very vast concept like culture. And very recently, and this is one of the recent quotes from UN official, which is, so more and more the world is leaning towards an idea of positive peace. It's not enough to just not have war anymore. For creating peaceful conditions, for creating peaceful societies, we need dignity and well-being for everyone. So these are the 8 pillars of positive peace. I'm just going to read them out. I will not go into them because this is not my focus today. But what we need is a well-functioning government, an equitable distribution of resources, free flow of information, good relations with neighbors, high levels of human capital, acceptance of the rights of others, low levels of corruption, and sound business environment. So you'll see it's not just 2 leaders signing a peace accord in some corner or in some country or some event, right? This is what we need, and it has to do with democracy, it has to do with governance, it has to do with economics, and all everything around us, right? So positive peace is a broad spectrum concept which needs functionality of a number of things and machinery. Going forward, this is typically called the peace wheel, again, just to touch upon the aspects of peace building, where these you will see are slightly on the negative peace spectrum, and these are on the positive peace spectrum. So things like development, solidarity, restorative justice, transitional justice, trauma healing, these are aspects of positive peace, whereas things like social change, government efforts, violence prevention, these are aspects of attaining negative peace. So just wanted to touch upon it. But today, my focus will be a little bit on education, this bit about education. I will touch upon peace education next. But most importantly, as Sana mentioned in the beginning, because I trained to study mythology, history, and culture. That's where my expertise and my deep interest is, and I will aim to look at peace building from that lens today, from the lens of culture. Moving on. Now, what is peace education? In short, peace education promotes the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to help people prevent conflict occurring, resolve conflicts peacefully, or create conditions of peace. Again, this vast spectrum that so when we say we want a peaceful society, how do we start? Where do we start? So peace education and doing it formally is one way. The national education policy in India has made 2020. In 2020, they made a very small provision for introducing peace education, but even now it does not it does not exist formally in most schools or curriculums, and there is a need to introduce formal peace education, because just as we teach our children science or mathematics, I feel in this world, in the situation that we are today, it's very important to teach them peace. And this is different from value education. We've all had value education in schools, and it's not really treated as a serious subject. It's just something that people do, and there's no seriousness around it. But peace education is a formal way of teaching modalities of peace to our children. So that's one way of doing it. And here there are many models of peace education of how to do it. And I've very recently given a lecture on peace education. It's available online for whoever is interested in that subject. But I'm just going to touch upon it. I spoke about this here also, but I'm not going into details. Here, again, like I said, many models of peace education. Here's one. It's called the petal model of peace education, where, like the peace wheel, it incorporates these elements. The objectives are to teach our children to value diversity, increase democratic participation, empathy, understand consequences of actions, and creation of peaceful environments. And these are the things that are the aspects, say, of peace education. And yes, I wanted to say here is something I want you all to also take note of. And all of this, and because these peace education models and peace building models have been evolving for about the last 20, 30 years in the West, but the conversation around the earth are just about beginning, because the climate threat is real. We are all facing it, and it's just growing in seriousness with every passing year. So when we talk about peace building, it is extremely important that we do not leave this out. This is not left, for environmentalists alone. It's not their job only anymore. It's each of, we here sitting in the interest group for it. Ours may be an interest group for dialogue and justice and solidarity, but solidarity with the earth, with the environment is also something that needs cognition. And we need to recognize the violence we inflict upon the planet. So if we are going to talk about peace, if that's what we want to promote and practice, doing so towards our earth is also an important aspect that I wanted to highlight. Yes. Now moving on, we go to a quick definition of culture. Culture can be, we saw again, culture is many things to many people, but here's a nice definition I found, which talks about all the ways of life, including arts, beliefs, and institutions of a population that are passed down from generation to generation. And culture has been called the way of life for entire society. As such, it includes codes of manners, dress, religion, language, rituals, and art. I picked this picture. I think it's very obvious. It's a picture of hippies from the 70s. Why I picked it is because they're very evident in the way they dressed, in the symbols they used. But even for this generation, the millennials, who are very far removed from the hippie culture, they're far removed in time. It's been almost 60 years since the movement flourished. And yet we know and we identify this movement with peace, with love. This is what a lot of the hippies spoke about. Why is that? Because I'll come to it. Why? But before that, we spoke about the culture of peace. I just wanted to bring both the definitions together. And what does it mean when we say we want to create a culture of peace? Is to create an integral approach to preventing violence and violent conflict. So they're all basically, they all segue into each other. The definitions of peace and conflict resolution, mediation, all of it comes together. But my focus today is culture. Because as I was talking about the hippies, and that's the time where these symbols you see on screen, the V sign, the dove, these are all associated with peace, right? We see it in design, we see it in pop culture. But I just want to show off hands from our people as to how many people know what these symbols really mean, or what the origins are. Does anyone know? Do we know what this means? I mean, no, we know it stands for peace, but why is it? Anyone? Could raise your hand, maybe offer an explanation. No? Okay. I'll give you a quick trivia. So the first sign, which is why it's important, because culturally, when we speak of culture, we're surrounded by this. This is what is forming the culture around us. The symbols, the art, the rituals, the stories. This is what. So when we say we're talking about a culture of peace, and how these hippies flash these symbols, what does it really mean? As the next generation of inheritors of peace builders and peace leaders and peacemakers, mediators, people who want to resolve conflict, who want to talk about justice, solidarity, dialogue. When we are inheriting these symbols, it's important to know what we are working with, what our tools are. Yes. So this is the letter V, essentially, which was adopted by the counterculture movement during the Vietnam War. So the hippies at that time, when people, peaceful people of the US especially, who were in opposition of the Vietnam War, would flash this as a rebuke to the government. They would flash the V sign, which would stand for the Vietnam War, but in a subversive way, which meant that but we stand against it. So that's how it came to be introduced into the vocabulary of peace. The dove, of course, has very ancient origins. It has place in many different cultures, but especially Christianity. It was formally adopted as a peace symbol in 1949 after an artwork made by Picasso, But the dove essentially, because it's white, because it's gentle, it has been associated with the Holy Spirit. In Christianity, the concept of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, the dove has been associated with the Holy Spirit. And eventually, in popular culture, because it has been defined in the West, which is Christianity-centric, the dove sort of got turned into a symbol of peace. And this last one, which is the most popular symbol of peace, actually is I forget the word. It's a flag. Okay, it stands for the letters N and D. It stands for nuclear disarmament. So if you'll Google semaphore something, so there are flag symbols basically. Every letter has can be denoted by flags. So the letter N and the letter D this is a combination of those two letters. So it stands for nuclear disarmament. So you have Vietnam War. So these are the legacies from that time that we are building upon. Our challenges today are different. So maybe we can work with these symbols. Maybe we need to create symbols and vocabularies of our own is something I want to focus on. And coming back to how these are really the tools, the fabric of what forms culture around us. And because, like I said, I studied mythology, and I'm going to come to it in a moment. Why I want to marry it to peace building today is because when I started studying mythology, it was like a turning point in my life. That's how I started gravitating towards the arena of peace building. Studying comparative mythology and religion helped me see what was similar across all different cultures. We are very myopic about our own culture. We see and learn only about what is present around us, and we don't really take the trouble of studying different cultures. But how impactful it is, and how it shapes our thought. How these templates, because we don't study them. So if peace education is something to be done formally, cultural education is something that often happens informally because it's around us. From the moment we grow up, the music we listen to, the films our parents are watching, the books our friends are reading. So all of this comprises the cultural substratum in which we start growing up. And, we, without really knowing or understanding, we absorb these, and these become the very templates of how we act in the future. For example, this. Are we familiar with these symbols, most of us? These works of art, these figures, these mythological creatures, these gods, depending on who you are and what you believe, these can be either of these things. Now, this person here, the Hindu god Ram, in his warrior avatar, the angry Hanuman, seen on the backs of many cars nowadays. In the last few years, this has become very popular sticker art. And Ram as a warrior has been used and abused by our current political party to create a very violent, what I believe is a very violent political mandate. It is far removed from what the figure of Ram can be spiritually, or what it was once culturally. Yes, he is a war hero, but the constant use of this template of Ram as a warrior has sort of erased from our minds the role of Ram in his other aspects, in his gentler aspects, in his softer aspects. And that is the formation, that is how culture forms. That is what society is listening to, is looking at over and over and over, until it becomes like the only role model, the only the schema, the only archetype, that we sort of align ourselves with. Similarly, Krishna as a warrior. So these are symbols and stories that are a very important part of the living culture that is India, and they drive our behaviors very, very often, very insidiously. These things are very deep rooted in our minds. So we don't study. No one really teaches us the epics in our schools. But do we not know the epics? We do. Even if we've not watched B.R. Chopra's Mahabharata, do we not know the Mahabharata at least roughly? Because it's all around us. It's around in the popular culture around us. It's It's in the stories of our home, told inside our homes by our grandparents, by our parents. So it is around us, whether we recognize it or not. It's not a classroom lecture, but it is something that affects us deeply and moves the way society, how society behaves and acts. Here's further, a couple of more symbols. Here is the Rodina Mart in Ukraine. And this is a similar, the motherland calls. It's in Volgograd in Russia. What is happening in Russia and Ukraine right now? I'm not saying these statues are to blame, but I'm saying these are important. These are very important figures, the way, say, a Taj Mahal would define India. To many people abroad, similarly, these are very important cultural symbols in Ukraine and Russia. Not taking sides, while these are both feminine figures, the ideals they represent are extremely masculine, that of war, that of aggression. So, I'm just asking you all to reflect on what cultural symbols like this, what kind of effect it has on the psyche of a society. If this is what we are seeing, we are believing, we are imprinting on our minds and on things around us, what does it orient us towards? So here are two examples. In India, outside India, these are two countries in war. Notwithstanding what their political position is, I want you to reflect on the cultural weight of these symbols. Moving on. Now, here's another set of pictures of the same three characters. Here is Ram again as a compassionate ruler. This is a reproduction, of the scene with Shabari, where I think most of you might know, where he tastes the fruits. She tastes the fruits to check if they are sweet, and the berries, the ber, as they say in Hindi, and Ram very happily accepts it. What about Ram's image as this accepting person? Shabari also belongs to a community that's, very far removed from, say, the Kshatriya or the Brahmin community. But there is another kind of messaging. Same person. Again, Hanuman. This is not an angry Hanuman. This is a very loving Hanuman. In our pop culture, do we see a Hanuman, a gentle Hanuman like this anymore? In today's society, in today's calendar art, in stickers that are stuck behind cars and autos, do we find this kind of Hanuman anymore? I haven't seen one in a really long time. So my guess is our society is suddenly only focusing on one aspect. See, violence and peace, as Sana pointed out right at the beginning, they're both parts of human nature. But it is for us to decide what we give precedence to. So say tomorrow we have a government or rulers who change and who decide to start promoting this. Do you think it will make, it will create an impact in society? Krishna is a friend to Sudama again. So these are virtues, these ideas. Is someone saying something?
A time check for you so we can have more round for the question answer.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. How much more time do I have?
You can take about 10 more minutes so that I have about 15, 20 minutes for questions.
I'll wrap in 10 minutes. Am I making sense so far? Show of hands. Okay. Thank you. Moving on. Now, so while those figures right there they're mostly celebrated as war heroes, which is why it's a tall ask when we say, don't talk about Ram as a warrior, because that's his USP, that he defeated Ravan. So one way to shift focus is to look at their natures in other contexts, or to pick more heroes or different kinds of characters that our cultural framework, our mythology provides us. For example, the king Janak, who's the adoptive father of Sita. He's also a character from the Ramayana, but how often do we hear of Janak? His only role is adopting Sita. and getting her married off. But if, for whoever reads the Ramayana or engages with it, or if people wish to use Ramayana as a political tool, all I'm saying is, hey, we have Janak also. Let's, why not talk about him? Let's lift him up. Let's hold him up as an example, because Janak was known as the philosopher king, extremely righteous, so righteous and so peace-loving and so wonderful. He didn't even have an army, a standing army in his kingdom. So we have an example from, our own myths. We have Vidur, again, Mahabharata, a very, very violent story overall. But the character of Vidur, despite his loyalties, sometimes you're born in situations and you have loyalties to people that you cannot switch sides, but that does not stop you from being an agent of peace, even within the given context. Even if your context is that of violence, even if your history is that of violence, you can be a Vidur who did not choose a side finally. In the Kurukshetra war, Vidur refused. He says, I am not going to fight on either side. So, and he was always the voice of reason. No matter what Dhritarashtra did, he was blinded by his son's love. But Vidur always served as the voice of reason, and never as a bias towards the Pandavas, but always as someone who needed to be reasonable, for a peaceful sort of a coexistence. Then, of course, we have the figure of Buddha. He's not mythological, he's history, but he's an important legendary figure from our mythological, ideological space, or substratum of India. So we have enough heroes. And why are we not talking about them? Why are we not upholding them? We have the tools. You tell me, you talk about only these people for some time, for a few years, have any conversations about them, use them as, political, whatever. And it might just start creating the shift in mindset that has happened over the last 8 years. It might start shifting. So we have the tools, is all I'm saying. That, when there is need for an argument, it doesn't have to be sophisticated Western models or modules of peace or peace builders. We have things within our own culture. And because these things affect us subconsciously, deeply, it is important to pay attention to these alternate heroes, heroes of peace rather than heroes of war. That's history. For those who are not interested in mythology or epic culture or whatever, we have modern day heroes in these gentlemen. Sir Desmond Tutu is no more, but Pope Francis, sorry about the typo there, and the Dalai Lama. Why I bring these people? Of course, there are many other people who are working for the cause of peace. Again, I study religion. And as someone who studies religion and culture, I understand the deep impact faith leaders have on our lives, And I'm talking about the masses, people who are educated, say English speaking, have the privilege of a certain kind of education, may be, free of the influence of religion, but religion is a very important part of our identities, of our culture again. And what faith leaders at the very top say makes a big difference. My favorite is Pope Francis. Among they're all lovely people, human beings. But Pope Francis is important to me, and I'll tell you how he's affecting a cultural change. You see, in the Bible, the biblical stance is that the earth is for man to use. That God created earth for man's use. Not in the exact same words, but that's the ethos of the Bible, which is why the Western world has not found it morally problematic. When capitalism developed in the West, it did not find it morally problematic to abuse the earth for our use, because the Bible allows it. Now, what Pope Francis is doing for the last few years is being a very outspoken advocate of, climate justice. He is beginning to shift the narrative. So every few years, the Pope writes something called the encyclical. An encyclical is like an open letter to the community, the Catholic community at large. So a few years ago, he wrote an encyclical called Laudato Si, which was entirely dedicated to the environment, to protecting the environment. Sorry. And the last encyclical he wrote was called Fratelli Tutti, which is dedicated to brotherhood and the spirit of fraternity. because he's seeing the violence that is growing around us. So, and what I'm saying is, again, this is a very important Catholic document. This is something that is, say, mentioned, referred to very often in Catholic churches across the world. Now, imagine the power. This forms, again, this becomes part of the culture, and this is what shapes behaviors of large numbers of people, which is why I bring them up as epitomes of peace in our day and age. So we can turn to history, we can to our past, we can turn to our present. There are enough resources everywhere we look. We just need to look. Unfortunately, our media only looks at conflict, at war, because it's exciting. It's got masala. Peace is not a very exciting news story. So we think and we focus and we look only at people who are propagating war. But here are people in our past and our present who are constantly, relentlessly working towards peace, and we need to, push our attention deliberately towards these stories of peace and propagate it. How bad stories get really, conflict, stories of violent conflict or terrible crime. These things go viral in minutes, but are we forwarding stories of peace when we find them? First of all, is anyone making them? Or anyone focusing on them? And if they focus on them, someone makes the effort, writes the story. Are we doing our part to at least propagate them? No one has to. We all can contribute to peace in different ways. Sometimes even a forward can help, or focusing on that, putting your mind to that story helps. Even if you don't have to go down and you don't have to join a protest movement, you don't have to do any of that. But if you want to talk about creating a culture of peace, it can start at many levels, including something like this. So my question to you is, although I shared the motherland monuments, my question is, and I wonder if the feminine principle is missing in all this, because I'm not saying men are entirely violent, but the sentiments around war and victory or dominance are usually termed as masculine principles. And in a patriarchal world, why is our world such a conflicted place right now? Why is it such a violent place? Because it is. I would like to think, or I would say with a lot of certainty, because it's run by men mostly. There are very, very few few women in positions of leadership, and even where there are men, are they being allowed to nurture, or use their feminine side? We all have both sides, right? So I think the nurturing feminine, that's the principle. That's probably a big piece of the missing puzzle of why the world is the way it is at the moment. So I picked the picture of Parvati here, who is riding a lion. She is in charge. She knows her power, but she's also a mother. And I chose this. Why? Because I didn't want to choose a normal Devi photo, because, we do this a lot in India. We just call women goddesses and that's it. And then we continue to abuse them. So Dashera is coming up in 3 days, but there's nothing's really changed. We're still burning, raping and burning and maligning. So it's a far cry, but what I wanted to draw your attention to is the nurturing principle that is very, very important to peace. So, and there are more examples of the nurturing feminine. Again, I'm stepping back in the past. These pictures of the Greek goddess Irene, the son Plutus. The symbolism is so interesting here because Irene is the goddess of peace. This is in ancient Greece, and her son Plutus is the god of wealth. So what does it mean? What does it tell us symbolically? That when there is peace, there is wealth. Prosperity follows. So it's a lovely symbol, in my opinion. And like I said, these figures were worshipped as goddesses in a certain society that achieved great heights, that saw great prosperity. The Greeks, and then the Romans also had this goddess called Pax, and here is an altar built for the goddess called the Ara Passus Augustae by Emperor Augustus, who was also known as one of the most successful emperors of all time. So with this, this is what I wanted to underline today. about the importance of cultural symbols, of how it affects us, our society, subconsciously, and if we want to build a culture of peace, we can of course start with peace education in schools, but we also have to address so many other things that surround us in the name of culture. So I think I've made good time, and the floor is now open for questions. I'm going to stop sharing. I will take questions. I will say my thank you for allowing me to speak for so long, and I will stop presenting.
Thank you, Urmi, for taking time out and talking about really important issues. We always talk about that, how violent and how aggression, is something which is pervading the society, but we hardly talk about how we are supposed to create a culture of peace. So it's really important that, you brought up all these points, and also something perhaps if you'll have time after some other people have asked questions. I also had a question, if you could, elaborate more on the difference between peace education and value education. But you keep that question first. We'll open it to the participants. And what we'll do is that perhaps you could write your questions on the chat, and Urmi can read the questions directly, and either Nupur or Anuja maybe could read the questions that follow. So the floor is open. We have about 10 to 15 minutes, and you can write your questions and Urmi would respond to one by one. But if somebody is more comfortable, they feel like they would want to speak, then that's also another option. So you could unmute yourself and address the question to me.
Am I audible?
Yes, please
Yes,
go ahead,
Ganesh.
Ganesh.
Okay. You talked about there is a very little provisions in regards to peace that is added in our NEP 2020. So, which are these provisions? Will you talk about this? Would you like to talk about this?
There is, so I have forgotten, there is a, I think number 11, point number 11 in the NEP, there's a sub point to that, where it talks about, where there is mention of schools providing education around values such as Shanti and Dharma. These words, Shanti occurs. So it's just a touch and go. It's not like an explicit mention for, but when it says that schools are to provide education around these principles, it's an opportunity for educators. So, it says, so if you create a module, short module, speaking explicitly about peace, because that is what Shanti is, I think you could justify why you're doing, because, schools ask for justifications for, if you want to change anything in the curriculum. And so, yeah, so I can share the reference later. I have it somewhere with me. I don't remember it just now, but I know it's there.
Adding to this question, I want to ask also one question to you.
Sure.
That is there any power relations among the peace education, regarding the peace education, because it is deliberately not exist in our society, and so-called narration is built in our society. What you said, that showing the Hanuman's picture in angry face. So would you like to share your thoughts in regards to this?
See, at a very broad ideological level, and this is ideally speaking, any government or any individual, any party should actually have no objection to talking about peace or wanting peace, So even the government of India will go and participate in the G20 forum and here and there, because, recently, and I think that's to Lord Narendra Modi too. I'm not a fan of the man, but he told Putin that, this is now the time for war. So it made an important political statement to the world. So ideally, it's, peace is something no one can or should object to. But we know how our politics, especially our electoral politics, works. We know how politicians will rouse, communal flames on purpose. Very often these things are planted, someone from a political party will go vandalize a temple or a mosque somewhere. Finished, or that's all we need. But these things are done on purpose to create electoral agendas, which are community centric. So again, capitalism, Brahmanism, these are all structures of violence. It is in the, it benefits people in power to keep these structures alive, right? Which is why there is, and this whole, again, this patriarchy, this hyper-masculinity, these are all things that have been created over centuries. This is not ek do din ka kaam, right? It's been around for a really, really long time. And because these help people who are in power, which is why, there is only one Gandhi once in a while, because who else is talking about peace and believing in it? There's only, yeah. So speaking of power equations, that's what I meant, that people who are in power and want to continue to be in power don't really want to put processes of peace into action, because that would mean them giving up their privilege. In a capitalist society, you want peace, you want equitable distribution of wealth, and Adani or an Ambani is not going to be very happy with that proposition, because we know how much they're sitting with. So yeah, that I hope I've answered your question, Dinesh.
We have one comment and one question in the chat box. So I'll just read it out to you, or you would want to?
I can see it.
Maybe for all the audience here. It's from Azim Siddiqui. He's saying that thank you for an engaging talk, Urmi. Engaging with mythology seems to be really the need of the hour. There are some interesting examples. Sorry, I've missed this. There's some interesting examples of intermixing mythology, which have ensured in building a culture of peace. For example, in parts of North Karnataka, there are myths that bring Hanuman and Hussein in dialogue with each other, where Muharram is celebrated for totally different reasons in majority Hindu villages. So can you suggest how a counterculture of peace can be built to challenge a culture of hatred? As in few concrete steps. And would you want to answer this first, and or do you want to take the next three questions together?
I think I'll go one at a time, because because I don't think I can answer Azim's question. It's a fabulous question, but concrete steps towards peace building, Azim, it's difficult, and it's certainly not the job of one person. And like I said, mythology and culture are my interest, which is why I focused on it. But as you saw in the peace building wheel, in the peace wheel, there are so many more aspects, in the space of mythology and culture. Maybe, so a lot of, in the last few years, especially, a lot of reinterpretations of myths have started appearing in the market. The story of Karna, the story of Sita, the story of Ravan. These are what's that word I'm looking for? Retellings. Yeah. So there are lots of retellings, which is the fantastic thing about our culture, that as of yet, that it's open source, like open source code. We can all sort of build upon what already exists without anyone really, unless you radically change something, people, don't usually object to it. So I don't see why, in that particular space, why we couldn't do our own retellings. Write your stories, tell stories differently, engage with children, let them know the original, but also reimagine it. So, but like I said, it's very hard to say what concrete steps there can be of building a counterculture, because it's actually a million different things. It's not one or two things. I can control, say, my skill is, say, as a writer, researcher. I can, as a journalist, I can move on to peace journalism. But that's just one aspect. But can I solve the problem of economic injustice or crimes against women? So a counterculture will need that many hands and many thoughts and many ideas working in tandem at the same time. It's not the job of one person or one aspect, but I can only do what I know. And through art, through dialogue, like you said, the example is so wonderful, the Hussain and Hanuman. And I'm sure there are many such examples across India. Our job at this moment could be to highlight this. Why have I not heard of this story before? Why have I only seen the beating, the matam aspect of that the Shia observance? That's because not enough people have spoken about it. So every year, let there be more articles. Let's educate people. Let's tell them that this is also a possibility. This is also a reality. It's lived religion, and it's fantastic. And maybe that will help. That might just change the perception of one Hindu reader who's on the edge of thinking that, oh, Muslims are always violent. Look at them. They're beating themselves up, making a show of blood and all of that. But that one person reads the story, and it may just change his mind about what Islam is or what the Muslim culture represents. So I think yes, we need to highlight these aspects to start bringing of a syncretic culture. We have so many examples. India is fabulous in that way. So I don't know. Like I said, I don't think I've answered your question, but that's what I think.
There are more questions coming up. So there is Ananya who's written, thanks so much for the talk, Urmi. I wanted to know your thoughts on whether you think that most of the time when we talk about the proponents, I keep losing this. When we talk about proponents or leaders of peace, whether it is the symbol of Ram, Hanuman, Janak, Pope, Dalai Lama, the focus tends to be on males or those from the powerful and dominant social groups rather than the minorities, Dalits, Adivasis, or women. Can we convince the society at large of the relevance and need for peace until the symbolisms themselves are more democratically chosen or are representative of the diverse voices of society? So that's her question.
Again, can we convince the society at large of the relevance and need for peace? Can we? I don't know. You tell me. Because like Azim, I was telling him just before you, it's a vast project and it's a constant. And that's the thing with peace building. Peace is not a state that will stay. There will never be one time when there is peace, and from that point on, there's utopia. Because human beings are human beings. You can solve the conflict between two people, but then again there's a third person. It's like constant firefighting. So this whole approach and shift is and it's a larger conversation. When you say the need for peace, again, depends on what you mean peace is. Peace means very different things to very different people. I was a part of some international conference on peace, where there was a speaker, a social activist from Syria, and it was heartbreaking. He was sharing some things about what the Syrian children are undergoing there, and he said something that really struck me. He said, for a Syrian child, one night of sleep without the fear of a bomb falling on their house is the idea of peace. Can you imagine? So what exactly are we convincing society of? We are so far from an equitable state of being, and there are so many kinds of violences and injustices that to convince society of peace means to have to convince society of equality and equity on all of those levels. Can we stop fighting about power, about dominance? Can we live more equally? So it's addressing all of those questions at once, which will never happen, honestly. So it's an ongoing thing. Peace is an ongoing process, but it starts from within. Again, when we say we want to convince society, are we looking at ourselves? The first step to any peace builder that I have learned, I'm still relatively new to the peace building field, but one of the most important lessons that I learned is that peace has to start from within, from here at home. Like they say, charity begins at home. Similarly, peace building also begins at home. in the way we talk to our parents, our children, our education system. We talk down to our children. We don't even consider them whole human beings. Just because they've not reached adulthood doesn't make them lesser persons. Their feelings are related to their scope, their life experiences, which may seem irrelevant to us as an adult, but they're completely valid. Do we even validate their feelings? Apne bachcho ke saath we don't, do that. So there is violence within us, within our homes, within our cultures. When I say culture, Indian culture, hey, bado se aise baat nahi karte. Even if the child is right, they can't back answer because why? Because, you were born earlier than them. So that is, in my opinion, it's a violence of culture. We do not encourage free conversation. We do not encourage democratic practices within our homes. And then suddenly the expectation is that we raise this child in this culture of domination, of hierarchy. Suddenly we expect that, they'll become model citizens when they grow up. How? Because we are failing to do this in our own homes. So when I say, when convince society, you have to start with yourself. Then, then broaden your scope. I don't know if it answers your question, but yeah.
We'll just take last two questions because we are running short of time. So there's one question from Prisia. She's asking, of late, the education campuses are becoming violent and there are so much sectarian approaches. What are the best ways to curb these unbecoming elements in higher education?
I don't know, Chrisia. Peace education, like I said, could be one way. But again, when we say sectarian, yes, I understand what you're referring to at the moment. But for a long time, our idea of education is very sanitized. We don't want, we don't want politics. We discourage politics in our campuses because, we only want our children to become capitalist stooges. We just want them to finish their degree, get a job, get a high earning job and settle down in life, get married, have children, have a car, buy a house. This is what we want. How are we going to create social leaders? Education, the university, which is a place for thought, thought building. If you're not encouraging, and by politics, I don't mean political parties, there's a difference. Politics is everywhere. Honestly, you cannot remove yourself from politics, no matter how much you hate it. Where there are two people, there will be politics. Yeah, the politics of relationships between two human beings. Politics does not necessarily mean electoral politics or the politics of political parties. But these conversations around equity, we're not having them in our universities. So we're not equipping our college students. So when these outside elements infiltrate and they commit violence, we've not equipped our children to stand up and tell them to, go away. We are just not equipping them to do that. So why the onus is not just on perpetrators of violence. They will do, because that's in their interest. They will create fear, they will create violence, they will create terror because it helps them. But as civil society, the way the Indian society stood up during CA and RC, when civil society decides to stand up, and 100 people decide to stand up for what is right, 3 perpetrators of violence cannot do much. That is my understanding. So what can we do in campuses? We can start with peace education. We can start with these conversations that are difficult but necessary, because otherwise we will never create conscientious citizens. We will never create people who will stand up for what is right and who will fight for peace. This is not an easy journey. It's easy to say, "Arey, peace hona chahiye," but what do you mean by that? And are you willing to work towards it?
And last question from Marzia. Thanks so much for your talk. Lots to think about and reflect on. To me, the predominant representation of the woman as nurturing is problematic. Just wanted some more clarity on the point you raised as the nurturing feminine being a missing piece.
So, Marzia, that's why I wanted to clarify that what I'm talking about is the principle. I completely agree with you about this gender stereotype, with the woman as the mother, as the soft person, but that's not what I meant. I meant as a value that's feminine, which a man can also have. When a man is nurturing, it doesn't make him less manly. What I'm saying is he's exercising a feminine principle. You know, man, women, like I said then also, we all have masculine and feminine sides. We all have values or, you know, aspects of our personalities that are slightly, I could be aggressive, you know, I'm a woman, I'm a mother. But if I'm aggressive, I'm exercising a certain masculine principle. That's what I meant. So I'm completely in agreement. But what I meant is nurturing as a value, as a soft value. Call it feminine. If you disagree, don't call it feminine. Just call it a softer value. So I was just underlying the principle of softness that is not in our society. You know, we are so quick to judge people. That is violence. The moment you see someone and say, even that judgment is violence. Nurturing, caring, really looking at the other person, listening, these are values, which brings me to Sana's original question about the difference between value education and peace education. So values and ethics are a very important building block of peace education. But as you saw, the peace wheel is so large. Peace education is much more, you know, all-encompassing. You need to be talking about equitable societies and, you know, other things, democracy, justice, all of that environment in peace education. In a value education class, you'll just talk about forgiveness, love, this, that. But where to? But then it only becomes an abstract concept. Where do you apply it in a larger society? So that's the difference. And I hope that answers your question, Marzia.
Yes, absolutely. I think so. You've been most gracious in taking all the questions and answering. Thank you so much for taking the time out. And I think all of us are taking back with us a lot of things to think about on peace, culture, the use of symbols, and know how to begin with doing intercultural dialogues. So thank you so much, Urmi. And thank you everyone for being a part of this talk. Just another side information, the interest group on dialogue, fraternity and justice. We have a site online, and there are also material that is available on peace, conflict resolution and management. So all of you feel free to download the material, use it in your daily lives. And if anybody wants to reach out also, you can reach out to Nupur, Anuja, me, or other members that are of the group. Thank you for everyone for joining us today. And hopefully we'll have more talks around this. Thank you again, Urmi. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Sana and Nupur, for having me. And thank you to everyone for staying on and listening. Thanks a lot.
All right. Okay. Bye. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.